Hey everyone, this is Mr. Stecker, and I'd like to take a few minutes to share with you a few of my opinions on the evidences we have for evolution and creation and how these fit into my worldview. You're in no way graded or judged based on this video, and watching it is of course optional. The nice thing about an opinion is that it's just that, an opinion. Feel free to judge it, criticize it, disagree with it, that's fine. I have a pretty thick skin, and I'm a long way from having all the answers. If this video is helpful at all to you, then it was time well spent. My degree's in biology, and I love life sciences. I'm not an archaeologist, geologist, or biblical scholar, and I don't pretend to be. With that in mind, let's approach some tough questions with the humble tools that I have. Let's first look at some highlights in Christianity's record of creation and life. Scripture tells us that God made the earth, light, dark, water, sky, land vegetation bearing fruit with seed in it, according to their kinds, lights for day and night, water creatures, birds, land animals, and finally, mankind from the dust of the earth. And it says in Scripture, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. We must all be descendants from these two people, Adam and Eve. Also in Genesis, we have a record of a global flood in which Noah's family, along with animals, two of every kind, along with every kind of food that is to be eaten, and store it away as food for you and for them. In chapter 7, we see that they actually brought 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal and 1 pair of every unclean animal, and 7 pairs of every kind of bird. So floodwaters come for 40 days and cover mountaintops at a depth of more than 15 cubits until every living thing that moved on land perished. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days, and now the Bible doesn't specifically tell us that the water creatures died, but I'm assuming that all the debris and turbulent waters were likely pretty tough on them as well. After this event, Noah's family grows, and all the people speak one language. They attempt to build a huge building, which we now call the Tower of Babel. God confuses their languages and scatters them all over the face of the earth. I have my own opinions as to why this all went down, and if you want to talk about that in class, we certainly can. Um, so that's the highlights for the creation side. Let's take a look at the other side of the story. In college, I received a very different story. I recall my Bio 151 course, my professor standing in front of more than 300 students in a huge lecture hall and stating confidently that evolution is the unifying theme in biology, and its truthfulness will not be a topic of discussion in this course. And then we moved on. No questions, no doubts, accept it as fact, and move on. Evolution by natural selection shows that natural populations are put under selective pressures that favor certain traits over others. Over time, the organisms with traits that are better suited to their environments survive and produce more offspring than their competition, therefore expanding the frequency of this trait in the population over time. It could be shortened to even changing allele frequencies over time. This idea is not terribly complicated. We can observe it, measure it, and even formulate mathematical equations to show that it works. Evolution requires a really long time to work, because advancements from the simplest prokaryotic cell, or ancestor of that cell, to all the diverse life that we see today is built on mutations in DNA, hopefully producing an organism that's better suited to its environment. Genes that encode proteins can be hundreds of DNA bases long, and some are millions of base pairs long. So coming up with a new gene out of previous mistakes, or at least unguided arrivals, takes a really, really, really long time. Evolutionary timetables will put the Earth at somewhere around 4.5, 4.6 billion years old, with life starting about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. The first cells were likely chemoautotrophs. Then photosynthesizing cyanobacteria evolved, then eukaryotic cells. During the Cambrian explosion, most modern body plans just show up in the fossil record, almost out of nowhere. Business really speeds up now. We get arthropods, terrestrial plants, footprints on land, jawless fish, lichens, teeth in fish, precursors of mammals and reptiles. Then comes the Permian extinction, which wipes out about 90 to 95% of every marine species alive. So now we get to essentially start over. But it's cool, because time is evolution's best friend, and we have millions of years here to play with. So, start over we do. The Mesozoic era brings us gnarly looking ocean predators that give Midwesterners like myself, who have only seen the ocean once, nightmares. Sturgeons and paddlefish that are still alive today, so I tip my hat to them for surviving for 248 million years or so, essentially unchanged. Dinosaurs, mammals, viruses, they all come into the picture about 200 million years ago, but to be honest, nobody's quite sure what in the world's going on with viruses in the evolutionary timeline. Some think they might have predated living cells. Flowering plants, angiosperms, come onto the scene at about 130 million years ago or so, and now we have a super cool system of pollinator, flower structure, coevolution that can drive flowering plants into the lead for advantages in diversity in the world of sex. Bees come on the scene about 20 million years after flowers and are like, sick, check out all these flowers. Then, like 90 million years ago, snakes evolve. I know, I'm sorry too. Then ants, flightless birds, mammals start to diversify. Say hi to your great great times 10 to the fifth or so granddad. Hi, great 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 granddad mammal. And so do most of your modern bird groups. We get our first whale in at about 55 million years ago or so, and the most recent common ancestor between man and chimpanzees at about 6 million years ago, give or take. Mammoths show up on the scene, as do the stout Neanderthals and even domesticated dogs. When it comes to humans, the genus Homo doesn't come on the scene until about 2.8 million years ago. I've heard it said that if evolution on the Earth were a 24-hour clock, humans would show up about 2 minutes before midnight. So we're pretty new to the scene. So where does this leave us? Both of these views, Christianity and evolution, involve at least one massive extinction, with evolution supposing that about 99% of the species that ever lived have gone extinct. Humans have not been around all that long in both views. A little under 3 million years in evolution, and about 6,000 years or so for your standard young Earth creationist. Evolution tells us that all land masses were at one time unified as Pangea, and Scripture tells us that, "And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." That's Genesis 1:9. So I might even be so bold to say that the idea of a pre-flood supercontinent for Christians shouldn't freak us out too much, because if the water is all gathered in one place, then there should probably only be one landmass, otherwise it'd have to be in multiple places? I don't know. Anyways, but I could be wrong. Both views are essentially cool with the idea of at least one ice age, pun fully intended, and the idea of people living in relatively small hunter-gatherer groups during and around this ice age should fit okay with both views as well. For evolution, they would be early humans, the first sapiens, and probably some of the last Neanderthals. For Christians, they would be small bands of people dispersed from Babel, with global cooling a surefire way that they did not remain as one large group dependent upon farming, only to take the time to learn each other's languages and start the whole tower project all over again. While Noah's flood answers the fossil and massive extinction questions, it does pose some issues because it means that the human population and animal populations went through a serious, almost incomprehensibly difficult bottleneck. The animals that would have left the ark would essentially have completely changed, almost empty world in front of them. Evolution tells us that when empty ecological niches exist, populations of organisms can diversify rather rapidly to fill those niches. This is essentially adaptive radiation's dream design. After the flood, abundant resources, likely dead animals everywhere to eat for predators, and essentially no competition from others of your kind. God designed his creation to be fruitful and increase in number, and I suppose that's exactly what they did. For example, gray wolves have 78 chromosomes, coyotes have 78 chromosomes, and domesticated dogs, you guessed it, have 78 chromosomes. So if Noah's Ark was true, does he need to bring two gray wolves, two coyotes, two labradoodles, or can he just bring two of the dog kind and let adaptive radiation and time do its work? So here's where we find ourselves. Two worldviews, strikingly different, but with some important similarities, and we must ask ourselves which, if either, is true. The answer? I don't know. I spend most of my time thinking about fly fishing or hunting, but here's what I think. Both views are extraordinary and have some pretty unbelievable claims. Let's just be honest. I can't very well wag my finger at the evolutionists of the world and say, that's crazy, when I honestly believe God formed man from the dust, and thousands of years later a virgin gave birth to his baby son. If anyone deserves the you're a crazy person finger wag, it's probably me. So, I must look at what I see in the world around me and evaluate which view fits best. I see people of all different heights, colors, languages that have nothing in common with other languages, along with a multitude of religions and explanations for how the world came to be. I see changes within kinds, but I don't see changes from one kind to another. I have to ask myself, could I have evolved from a single cell? Sure, natural selection makes a lot of sense. But for the first carbon and hydrogen that chemically bonded and formed an amino acid, did that chemical have a selective advantage over the other ways that carbon and hydrogen could have bonded in that pool? The animals and people alive today were filled with information. But how did the earliest forms of that information have any advantage? I don't know. If I can't look at the past with any assurance, perhaps I can look ahead. Maybe we can logic our way out of this little issue. Let's take a look at both of these worldviews and take them to their logical extent. If evolution is true, I'm a highly evolved animal, the product of billions of years of evolution. I have no claws, fangs, nor significant hide, yet my species is over 7 billion strong, and we've shaped the planet in ways no other species has, except for maybe cyanobacteria giving us oxygen. We've won the evolutionary game, yet my life has no purpose. Surviving and producing offspring are the end games in evolution, and once I do those things and die, nothing I do will have any significance or purpose. If I really took evolution to its logical extent, I would probably want about 4, maybe 5 wives, as that would increase the genetic diversity of my offspring, and I would want to father about 20 or 30 kids, as that would ensure that many copies of my genes were spreading throughout the human population through my many, many children, and my biological fitness would be pretty set. I would live, consume resources, produce young, die, and leave in my wake more humans to consume more resources on a big blue ball in the middle of a vast, black, cold universe that has no point in even existing in the first place. If I take Christianity to its logical extent, I am a human, different from animals, made in the image of God, and in the rather brief process I call my life, I can know Him more, know myself more, learn His purpose for my life, teach His ways to my children, and learn more about this awesome planet He made for us so that we can all exercise good and wise dominion over the resources He's given us. I have a purpose. I was put here for a reason. I see His handiwork everywhere, and the physical evidence I have does not conflict with the Bible. If you're still confused, don't worry. I am too. And just remember, all we're trying to solve here are the 3 biggest questions that have haunted humanity for all of our existence. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where do we go when we die? These are but speed bumps for intellectual titans like yourselves. Have a great day, and as always, thanks for your time.